All right, welcome. My name is Mike Roeth. I'm the Executive Director of the North American Council for Freight Efficiency. It's a real honor and pleasure to lead this discussion. Now, I should call it a debate. It's a debate on the future of long-haul trucking. So help us deliver that debate by participating over the next 45 minutes along with myself, Lakshmi, and Rob. Before we get going, a couple of logistics. This session is being recorded, and it'll be available to you, through an email, or I think you can just go see recordings through this website over the next few weeks if you want to go back and see it again, or tell somebody else about it. We'll be using the chat or the Q&A function off to the right on your screen. I'll be monitoring both of those. If you've got a question for us, use the Q&A, and I'll be keeping an eye on that and delivering some questions to Rob and Lakshmi, and maybe answer a couple myself. But I as a moderator, I get the right to force them over to the two of them. We've also have a poll that's been created. So if you hit the polls, I believe that poll will come up, and you can vote on one of these technologies. You can do that right now, or if you want to let the debate flow and do it later, you can do it anytime. And at the end of the 45 minutes, I'll share the results, or maybe you can see them there. I'm not so sure. At the very end of the session, if you wouldn't mind taking a survey, that's that survey button on how this went. We'd appreciate it. So with that, let's get started. I'm going to share a couple of slides very quickly to kind of get ourselves grounded and get this event going. So here we go. So, in trucking, there's a lot of options for decarbonizing long-haul freight. And we're seeing some of these take place and start to emerge in smaller trucks where electric vehicles, whether they be vans and step vans, medium-duty trucks, or into the shorter regional haul. But when we approach this long-haul market, or also that would include sort of return to base regional long haul. So, situations where the trucks are going 300 or 400 or 500 miles a day, or maybe they're, being driven by teams or slip seating, the trucking industry calls it, where the truck's used during two shifts with, a driver in the truck during the day and a second one at night. And I think maybe Rob will educate us a little bit on that. But we're seeing all kinds of options in the press and in the press announcements by various manufacturers and so forth, whether it be improving diesels in IC engine trucks, electric trucks, or hydrogen fuel cell trucks, and even cases where hydrogen's being burned in an engine. So the way NACFE looks at this in the work we've been doing is here in this graphic. Hopefully you can all see it well, but what we have is the present day here in the early 2020s, where this green and zero emission vehicle technology is pretty immature. There's a lot of unknowns, a lot of challenges, and the industry today is dominated by legacy diesels, or even the ongoing modernization of those diesels, but and a few natural gas trucks. If we jump out to the long-term future, we truly believe that we will be decarbonizing and moving to a zero-emission freight movement future in these long-haul trucks. And so what does that mean? Well, that looks like fast charging everywhere, long life, low-cost batteries, and weights that are acceptable. And that these trucks are charged with clean energy, whether they be battery electric vehicles or hydrogen fuel cell ones. So that's kind of what we're here to debate, is sort of where the long term is, but you can't get there, overnight. And, we're suggesting 2050, maybe it's, dominating by 2040, not sure. But between today and then, we have this time period of a couple of decades of some very interesting and what we call messy middle that we're in. And that is a lot of technologies are emerging, whether they be renewable natural gas, renewable diesel, hybridization, the early battery electric trucks, and so forth that are coming. Some of those might get sunsetted over these decades before we get to that final clean energy. So a lot of challenges here and a lot of opportunities. So what I'd like to do is stop sharing these slides and bring in our panelists to really get in and talk about these technologies and where we think the industry is going. So welcome, Lakshmi and Rob. Let's have both of you First of all, just introduce yourself and your company, and what comes to mind when you think about zero emission for long haul trucking. Uh, Rob, since you operate a fleet, let's start with you and tell us about yourself and the company and what you're doing in this area.
Sure will. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. So I'm Rob Reich. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer at Schneider. We're a large transportation and logistics company based in Green Bay, Wisconsin. That's where I am at our headquarters. About 10,000 company trucks, more than 62,000 trailers and containers. So we're both a full truckload, dedicated and over-the-road network business, as well as a very large intermodal business and a non-asset logistics business in addition to that. I've been here at Schneider for 30 years, spent the majority of my career on the equipment side of the house. As CEO, my accountabilities are several. I've got accountability for safety, recruiting, and training, but really for the purpose of today, I'm accountable for all of our asset acquisition, engineering, maintenance, and disposal. And so spending a lot of time, as you'd guess, in the sustainability space. At Schneider, we've set some fairly aggressive sustainability goals over the last couple of years, the primary one being reducing our emissions per mile by 60% by 2035. And so that's really led us to start taking action in this space. And we'll talk more about this, but our biggest initiative right now is out in Southern California as part of the Joint Electric Truck Scaling Initiative, where we received a grant for 50 battery electric vehicles that we'll start to take delivery on near the end of this year and deploy them in our intermodal operations in Southern California. So that's the first big step for us.
Wow, fantastic, Rob. Lakshmi?
Hello, everyone. I'm Lakshmi Kamitradi. I'm the project manager in connectivity and commercial sector at Black & Veatch. I've been with Black & Veatch for almost a little over 15 years now, leading different technologies, different projects. But right now, for the past few years, I've been leading our EV projects throughout the project lifecycle, helping clients with, starting from the feasibility studies, to define their fleet characteristics or exploring different technologies, technology options, and understanding clients' on-site demands, and helping them all the way from like the EPC perspective of the project, from utility coordination to the engineering, the design, permitting aspect, and the procurement of different equipment needed for the EV installation, and then construction and commissioning services. Um, Decarbonization has become tightly tied to our economy and to our customers that we help, and their expectations to meeting their sustainability goals and the clean transportation. And Black & Veatch has been a market leader in deploying these, whether it's EV or hydrogen fuel. We've been a market leader in deploying these technologies for a long time, and helping identifying operation impacts on the carbon cycle, on the global carbon cycle, as well as looking at the climate risks and opportunities to understand these emerging technologies, and to come up with a strategy and a roadmap to remove carbon footprint from clients' operations and reducing overall greenhouse gas emissions.
Very good, very good. So, Rob, I've said many times that, I didn't think batteries would ever haul freight. And if it did, it might be in a tiny or small truck, right? But here we are talking about long haul trucking. I mean, tell us about I don't know if it's your personal journey or Schneider's journey over, say, the last few years. And, that brings us to today. And then what are you thinking about and how are you thinking about it going forward?
Well, Mike, I was in the exact space you were. I can think back probably 5 years ago, having some early discussions about the possibility of, Class 8 electric trucks. And my thought was, I'm not sure I'll see that in my career. And I still got a few years left now, so clearly it's coming faster. And so as we got educated, it really was where the technology is taking us. And I think, as we've learned probably multiple times in our careers, it tends to come faster than you might think. And that's what we're seeing with battery electric. So as we look, we think there's a huge opportunity. In fact, when we set that sustainability goal for us by 2035, part of our assumption is clearly a significant portion of the fleet would likely be electrified by that point. Now, as I mentioned, we're starting in intermodal. And so once we see that, hey, this is an opportunity here, that the technology is going to be real for us, it is. And what are those operating characteristics that fits within our business? And today that really fits quite well in our intermodal drayage business because of the shorter haul nature of the initial trucks that we'll take delivery of, right? And so, but hey, we have a very large intermodal business. And so that really creates a significant opportunity for battery electric vehicles to come into the fleet. And so I think that's that first key step for us. And this California initiative is really exciting because it allows us to really stretch ourselves, not just using the truck, but then operationally of how do we make sure that, it's meeting all the operational needs that we have in addition to just functioning as a vehicle. So we're really excited about that. So that's really what that journey's been, is believing it, getting our hands on it, testing some trucks, and then determining where's that first key step where it can work within our business.
Yeah, so let's talk about that first key step a bit. I mean, those trucks, unlike your truckload long haul business, those trucks return to the same spot every
That's correct.
night or day or whatever. But get us. So yes, they're shorter runs, but they shuttle back and forth. Either one full shift or maybe two shifts. Tell us a little bit about, as you deploy these electric trucks, are they going to be able to do the job of diesels, and kind of how are you going to manage all that?
Yeah, we think they are, Mike. And as you mentioned earlier, intermodal is typically a slip seat operation. And so that means that truck's running with two different drivers, two shifts a day. So day shift, night shift, whatever that appropriate time might be. So today, those trucks are running about 22 hours a day. And so we obviously have to consider then, you got the charging time, which is different than diesel fueling time, obviously. And it's all the things that Lakshmi was talking about, and the things that Black and Veatch are helping folks like us think of, is how we set up the charging and how we can operationalize that. Because for this to work, you still have to be able to slip seat it. We can't go from a truck running two shifts a day with diesel to running one shift a day with electric. That would obviously not work from an efficiency and financial standpoint. So we have to adjust our operations slightly to ensure that we can get the trucks charged and still run 20 to 22 hours a day for each of those assets. And so we believe we have the right plans in place, but that's, again, the exciting nature of this test. It's really why California wanted to do a larger test. It's easy to test two trucks because you're really just kind of playing a little bit. Let's be honest. When you put 50 on one site, it's either going to work or it isn't, and it really challenges you operationally. So that's the exciting nature of this particular test, is that it's a 50 truck deployment. That's half our operation at that particular site in California. So we'll know, and we'll have to be prepared operationally to make that slip seat work. And what we've done, Mike, we've actually tested this in current state, is we're changing the way we assign trucks to drivers. And so that's what we've realized we had to do. You have to be willing to make some modifications to your processes to adjust for the charging time versus the fueling time. And so it'll be a slightly different way that a driver gets a truck issued. Basically, you're not going to drive the same truck every day, is what it fundamentally comes down to.
Yeah, very interesting. So Lakshmi, as we think about, boy, we can talk about all kinds of things, right? We can talk about today and long term and electric and hydrogen. So, what are you seeing and what are you learning today with maybe depot infrastructure and so forth that's going to help us as we look into the future of long haul trucking?
Yeah, I think, many fleet operators, or like these big organizations that have trucks, like, Rob was saying, have this question in their mind on what is the best technology for them to choose. So although this is a debate, it's not actually truly a debate, because we are seeing successful investments in both EV and fuel cell spaces. And in fact, we think the best decarbonization plan may be one that is flexible, maybe in the future, near future, but one that is flexible enough to include both technologies, and optimize that is able to optimize for different duty cycles, different use cases, different locations, and depending on the climate that the site is in. So both, in my opinion, I think both the EV and the hydrogen fuel markets are off to a good start, but there are several ongoing trends that are merging to increase the market's momentum. Right, these trends are are good, like a form of they create positive cross-sector synergies. The combined effect of these synergies will help us advance commercialization of the zero emission vehicles, and help us become, or help organization get to more cost effective and impactful across the different sectors. Whether it's, we're seeing, we were just talking about this, the battery technology, right? The pricing of the batteries also have plunged down like tremendously. Like, about, we're seeing some forecasting that said, or the numbers, market trends saying they have gone down by, the battery prices alone have gone down by 77% in the last 5 to 6 years. So we're predicting much better technology and lower prices on battery prices. And if you're looking at the electrolyzer for the hydrogen fuel, that is becoming, more and more technology is emerging from there, and the electrolysis technology is expected to be the fastest growing market, just from 2020 to 2025, and by 2030. We're thinking electrolyzer technology improvements will contribute to about 60% of the reduction in the cost of hydrogen, green hydrogen production. So there is tremendous growth. So depending on the use case, whether it's, EV versus hydrogen fuel, there is technology improvement in both areas.
Yeah, very good. So, there's a poll question. If you out there want to answer that poll question, it is, in that tab, and then use the Q&A. I've got a couple questions that have already come in, but let me go to each of you again, kind of quickly for a little bit, starting with Rob again. So, Rob, you're bringing in battery electric trucks. You're probably doing a lot of testing and knowledge building and so forth on batteries. They seem to be ahead of hydrogen fuel cell by a few years, whether it's development of the components, putting them into trucks, the truck builders testing them and getting them ready for you. So what are you learning about? Let's get into the battery electric versus fuel cell for your, either your dedicated business or your long haul business. What's the advantages of both of those with respect to what your business, your bigger business, and where you see that might shake out?
Well, I think it's particularly in the messy middle phase, as you talked about, Mike, and as you just mentioned, batteries are ahead. So we know, in order to start making the progress that we're looking to make, that's the place to go if you're going to start to see that progress. And so I absolutely think that battery electric is a very good solution in our shorter to medium haul type of applications. And I would anticipate that continues, just based on cost trends that Lakshmi talked about, and then just infrastructure availability. Now, obviously, you still have grid considerations, as we all know, and as we're learning as we go through this electric journey, that it's not going to work everywhere because of some of these grid limitations that we'll likely run into, and that need to be addressed from an infrastructure standpoint across the country. But I think that battery electric will be that shorter to medium haul solution, especially the return to base type of applications that we're talking about. And that's a lot of intermodal and a lot of dedicated, which is a significant portion of the industry. And so I think there's plenty of fertile ground there for battery electric to expand. Longer term, then, what we're learning is that will range get better? Sure. I was talking before the call started about my brother's Tesla. He's got an old one. It's limited range. The newer Teslas have much greater range, changes the experience. We'll have the same experience in trucking. We know the Gen 3 truck we're going to buy in a couple of years will have better range. My sense is that with a weight and range and cost trade-off long term, batteries probably not going to get past your medium range applications. And that really positions that fuel cell discussion for those longer over the road type of solutions that we would still be looking for. And again, is another sizable component of our business at Schneider, as well as the industry.
Right. Yeah. And so, Lakshmi, in the discussion, whether it's the press or in events like this or so forth, we always jump to the trucks, and we talk about, the differences between a hydrogen fuel cell extended range electric vehicle truck versus an EV and so forth. But there's huge differences around the infrastructure, not only in how electricity is generated and distributed, and how we will then, hydrogen will need to be generated, distributed. There's different, technologies around actually delivering the energy or the fuel to the truck. So in this sort of discussion around the value of hydrogen fuel cells versus electric, what are you seeing out there from an infrastructure standpoint that might lead us one way or another?
Yeah, I'll tag along to what Rob was saying earlier. I mean, depending on the need, whether it's longer range trucking needs versus shorter range, definitely for the longer, we are looking at hydrogen, but it is not as prevalent as the EV charging at this time. I mean, if you look at numbers, we're doing a lot of EV infrastructure design and construction versus hydrogen. But as I was saying earlier, the technology is catching up, and I think we will see the trend kind of shifting to maybe half and half in the near future. But right now, agree with Rob, it is mostly the EV arena that we are in, and that messy middle section that we were looking at earlier is also the batteries, the technology, battery technology that is supporting EV. There's just a lot of competition and a lot of incentives, which we haven't touched on it yet, but the lot of policies and the different federal and state rebate programs that are placed around, or that are created around EV, is very attractive to a lot of organizations who are looking into, or the fleet operators who are looking into electrification and the decarbonization, their road to the zero emission vehicles. So just to take advantage of those programs, we're seeing more and more EV at this time. But again, that can change any time in the near future.
Yeah.
Just to
Yeah, just like, yeah, sorry to interrupt, but just
go
like
ahead.
we were talking about how battery electric trucks surprised us as how fast they went from, I don't know that that's going to happen, to, a pretty reliable and interesting 200-mile heavy tractor. Who knows where hydrogen fuel cells will be, just around the corner maybe.
Mhm. No, absolutely. And the infrastructure that comes, I personally haven't worked on hydrogen fuel, the infrastructure projects, but it does come with, limitations, or water availability to generate the required hydrogen to support hydrogen fueling station. I mean, there are some limitations with that, but if there is the client and they have all those resources to design and construct a hydrogen fuel station, I mean, more power to them, and they can be those
Yeah,
leaders in that arena.
right,
Mike,
right. So as
one more
yep,
comment I would make, Mike, as we think about the debate, like what's going to be that medium to long haul solution, we got to keep thinking about the driver experience here, which may dictate this a little more than people might think, because, if you're trying to get a greater range from a battery electric, maybe this may not be a right assumption, but charging times, you can't ask a driver to stop for 90 minutes to charge when today's fueling could take 15 minutes, right? And I believe hydrogen fueling as well would be shorter in nature. That's, for that longer haul driver, the return to base
right.
driver, not a big deal. That longer haul driver, boy, every minute counts. And
Yeah.
that could really dictate a lot of the decisions and what the answer to the debate is, perhaps even more than some of the technology occasionally.
Yeah, well, you just teed up a great question that we got in the Q&A, so we're starting to get them. So I'm gonna go there. With the fact that these, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when on battery electric trucks. We're starting to see a lot of technologies and companies and great ideas emerge. So one that we have here in a question is battery swapping and battery as a service for long haul electric trucking. I mean, if could you swap batteries and at that stop and get to the 15-minute time frame or less, and keep that truck rolling, and charge the battery. I know that's been discussed in passenger car and kind of pushed aside, but that and other kinds of solutions like that. I mean, how do those emerge, and how do you think about those?
Well, I always want to be open to any creative solution, Mike, and I think it's important that that's the step we take. My concern with a swap out, again, just limited experience so far with the OEMs, it's a little more complicated than what it sounds, just given the scope and size of the battery system within a truck. Then the other issue is, if you're using good charging practices, you're going to extend the life of your battery. If you're not, you're going to shorten it. And so would I be comfortable in swapping batteries knowing that, boy, that next set I get may not have the range of the good one that I took care of? And so those would be the questions we would have going into that. Yep. Is how can we ensure consistency of performance? And so I think that would be the hurdles there, both just can you functionally do it, and then what capability are you getting out of those batteries if you're turning them constantly and perhaps get a bad set, all of a sudden your range is short and the driver pays.
Right. Right. So the next question is around this, like I called it a plethora of solutions earlier when we kicked this off, but a lot of solutions. And so, the question is around, how are fleet managers thinking about the next 3 to 5 years with respect to wanting to move the ball forward and understand maybe what their long-term solution is, but take advantage of some short-term ones. And so, we've noticed in long return to base operations, companies going to natural gas and renewable natural gas while they also stay aggressive in electric trucks. But boy, now you got new infrastructure, you got new train trucks, you got new this and that. So even for fleets, or as fleets, really want to do sustainability, and there's a chance of deer in the headlights and doing nothing, or maybe even doing too much. What do you both think about that? And I'll start with you, Lakshmi, when it comes to, sort of like this depot infrastructure. It could be a lot of projects over the next couple of decades at these fleets.
Yeah, when we're talking about these depot projects, a lot goes into not just from the financial aspect of the projects, but also the personnel, training all the drivers or the operation guys with this new infrastructure. That in itself is like a learning curve that takes, whether it's EV, hydrogen fuel, or natural gas. Once their plan is to go with certain technology, a lot of effort and resources are going into that planning to make it successful, whether it's a 10-year plan or, however long. And like you said, we're all in this like learning as we go. We haven't done this before. We're learning it together. So whether there is a failure, whether it's planning failure or or technology that we've never used and we were implementing that, it's going to take us at least like few years to figure that out before we shift to another like plan B, in my opinion. So at this time, we don't know what we don't know in terms of these new technologies that are emerging. But I don't know, Rob, what do you think? What are you guys seeing?
Those are great questions, because it is, you can only put so much effort, right? You only have so much effort you can do. And I define effort broadly: cost, resources, time. And so it is that quandary of, do I want to do something to your like natural gas example, Mike, that might only be a great solution for 5 to 10 years, knowing that everything, eventually you're probably electric with all that. So that is it's a great debate, and that is a great debate, and one I'm not sure what the right answer is. I think the variable that we have as an industry that we haven't had in the past as it relates to this is our customers, and that our customers have also set very aggressive sustainability goals, and we need to be part of that solution. And so I think we're going to have pressures and challenges in a very positive way that, in my career, 30-year career at Schneider, we didn't have 10 years ago. I mean, they wanted us to be efficient, but it was more of a cost and, hey, make sure you're doing the right thing. Now it's, hey, I want to work with a sustainable fleet. I want to work with a fleet that has a plan. And it might be, for this particular freight, I absolutely want a lower emission solution. And in the next 5 to 10 years, we may not have the long-term solution. We may need one of those messy middle solutions to enable our customers to make that progress. So I do think that's why we have to think about it differently as fleets than we have historically. It's not just about us. We have to align ourselves with our customers' goals, and that might lead to doing some things in that messy middle that are only 5 to 10 years in length, that isn't the long term, but is necessary to make the progress that our stakeholders expect us to make.
Yeah, I mean, here at NACFE, the big one of the big ahas we've had the last few years, and a determiner of how aggressive fleets can be, is if they return to base. If you return to one location, this has come up a number of times already in this half hour, then you have options. And that could even be going fast with natural gas or with, something else, because, you just have a confidence that you can charge and fuel those trucks. So getting to a couple more questions. We have well, before we do that, we have a poll going on. So if you want to click on polls to the right of your screen there and pick one, we'll keep talking about the results. But we have some questions around truck drivers, and you brought it up a little bit ago, Rob. And when NACFE, we did run on less electric last year. I told the team, we know the drivers are going to like the truck, so let's don't make a big deal about it. But they liked it much better than I even thought. I mean, they love these trucks, and I think what we're starting to see, and we're hearing that with fuel cell as well as electric, is because with our driver experience, really the electrification of the system in a fuel cell truck gives that very similar driving experience. So, and I guess yesterday in one of the Electrify sessions, there was a discussion about training drivers for electrification and so forth. We're kind of course you got to train them, but we think they're so much simpler to drive that training experience is going to be really short compared to, say, what we've been through in driving manual transmissions or even automated manuals. So, Rob, you don't have a lot of experience. You'll gain a lot next year with these trucks, I'm sure. But what are you thinking about with respect to helping the drivers learn how to drive these trucks and get the most out of them?
Yeah, when we had a test truck in our intermodal fleet, Mike, we had a small group of drivers as our primary test drivers and got tremendous feedback. So to your point, really enjoyed the experience of driving an electric truck. Very quiet, great handling, great acceleration. Similar if anybody's driven an electric car, a very similar experience in a truck. And so we think just from a baseline acceptance standpoint, they'll be quite popular because they're going to be nice to drive. What we saw really interesting is we had 3 primary drivers. Other guys got experience, but 3 primary. One of those 3, his range was 17% greater than the other 2 on the electric test truck because he very quickly mastered regenerative braking. So that was probably the best takeaway we got from the drivers through the experience, is we had somebody who really got it and really embraced, hey, I'm going to really see what I can do here from a range standpoint. Well, that's going to inform a lot of our training, obviously, is we got to get everybody to where that guy got through that experience. So it was a wonderful example of why testing these vehicles is so important. You get some insight there that will really help you train folks. And so I think that was our big takeaway was, wow, the drivers will have a greater impact here than they have on a typical truck. I mean, obviously the driver always impacts the performance of the truck. It'll be greater here because it is a different driving experience that you have to learn. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm excited as we deploy these trucks that we can train people and really measure, are we hitting it, and are they able to extend the range like we think they might be able to?
Yeah, 17% is huge. I mean, that's both saves money, time, also that range extension, and also allows that driver to make a delivery that maybe somebody else can't make. So really interesting. Another question that I want to dig into, because it comes up all the time, and that is, how are fleets going to be able to afford this technology? I mean, early on here, we hear everything from 2 to 3 times as expensive as a diesel truck. We'll see how that comes over time. And, we've got big fleets dominating the early purchase of trucks, but, all the way to the, owner operator or the, the lease operator model where, they're operating these trucks. Maybe both of you can talk to this. First, Rob, on how you're thinking about that in the truck purchasing, and then Lakshmi, you got where are we going to charge these things, and how that might work with respect to the small fleets versus the big ones.
Well, you're right. Today, Mike, these trucks are very expensive. They are 3x your standard diesel truck. Now, we clearly anticipate with any new technology, you typically see some reduction of costs as the technology develops. Today, the programs we're involved with are public-private partnerships, and that's helping to offset some of the costs, both of the truck and, as Lakshmi could talk about, the cost of the infrastructure as well, because both can be sizable as you deploy these. Again, I anticipate some drop on the electric side. Unfortunately, I anticipate some increase on the diesel side with some of the regulations that are coming in 2024 and 2027. We know that will likely increase the costs. We've got to manage through that, hopefully find some better solutions. But I think over the next 5 to 10 years, we'll see that get closer and closer together. Then it really is the rest of the equation. And that's what we're going to learn from our initial experience here of where else can you save money? I would anticipate maintenance cost reduction. I would anticipate overall cost of fuel/power reduction. And so I think as all that comes together, that's going to help us determine what those key next steps are going to be from a funding standpoint. And really that's going to dictate a lot of how fast this gets adopted. Is if the operational costs we find are better perhaps than even we anticipate, then you start to offset that upfront cost.
Interesting. Yeah. Lakshmi?
Yeah. So, from the infrastructure perspective, definitely there are, it's expensive because it's all brand new infrastructure for EV or fuel cell. But we touched on this a little bit earlier, but the state and federal incentives that are in place, especially California being the leader in some of those, policies that are in place, that some of the policies can fund up to 80% of your infrastructure cost for clients, as long as you agree to providing them some stats on how the system, the infrastructure, your EV system is performing, and also sometimes it actually is beneficial for the utilities as well, because then it decreases the infrastructure, EV infrastructure, or supplemental, or the ancillary solar system. If you combine that with battery energy storage, it creates so much efficiency and reduces the load on the grid. It is a win-win. So from the infrastructure perspective, although it is expensive, and even from some of our projects and clients are able to take advantage of these funding, not only for the infrastructure but also the truck sales, purchasing the trucks. So that is a huge incentive for some of these fleet operators or clients, our customers, to go the EV route.
Right.
Even with so many uncertainties right now, with the new batteries coming, new technologies coming, it just gives that extra motivation to take that path with these.
Yeah. Great. Yeah.
Policies.
That's really interesting. Yeah. 7-8 more minutes to go. And I got some killer questions here that I want to ask you too, and maybe me as well. But a great question from Vanessa on data. So, when we're going through transformations, right, data is really important, because a lot of times we think we know things, and then the data tells us we were wrong, or we were misled, or we were exactly right. So both of you, what are the data, both on the maybe the charging side that fleets should be making sure they're looking at, and Rob, maybe on the truck side as well. So how are you approaching that? I mean, we always say at NACFE, when somebody says, what's our first step on electrifying, we always say, understand how you run your diesel trucks. And it takes telematics. It takes a lot of analysis, or at least some, to know how you operate them to be able to make the choices going forward. How do you guys both do it internally and suggest others should?
Well, Mike, I'm with you there. I think it's the comparative to your diesel, right? So all of your productivity metrics, your fundamental productivity metrics should be the same. How many miles per day am I putting across the truck? What's the truck availability, and those type of things. So absolutely, we'll start with the same stats that we always start with. I think the extra here is some of the range data, charging time data. because I talked about our slip seat operation. We got to make sure that these trucks are turning fast enough and getting that appropriate charge so that we don't have drivers waiting for them, right? And that's where we would see that productivity metric. But I think, again, most of the comparison is to your diesel fleet and should be some of those same statistics. Then you've just got those a couple unique measures on top of that.
Yes. So from infrastructure perspective, we say that to determine that the total cost of operation or optimize the technology and then translate that into the route data or the cost savings, it is important to understand their drive cycles, their route or the fleet route lengths and the conditions that they are going to be running those trucks in, and the stats around lifetime, the cycles or the payloads, the dwell time. Those all need to be considered to come up with the best cost savings and optimize their cost of operation.
Yeah. So there was a question on regenerative braking percent, and Rob sort of talked about it, but I'd have you go to runonless.com, where we did that 13 truck run last year, all electric trucks, and we saw 30 to 40% levels of regenerative braking. So the truck builders can set different levels of regenerative braking. Some are allowing drivers to set those different levels, but obviously drivers have a huge impact there. So you can see some of the real data on different routes on NACFE's runonless.com. Got another question around using hydrogen as a fuel, or some of these, renewable fuels, and we only got a couple of minutes, Rob, but that's some of that messy middle where some of those will be drop-in fuels and easy to use. Others will require you to do some bigger work, whether it's RNG or burning hydrogen in an engine, which is interesting, yet still causes emissions and has other challenges. What are you thinking about that now? Are you kind of ignoring it, acting on it a lot? What do you think?
We're still in the get educated phase there, Mike. I think, as you said, a lot of different options. I'm very curious about where renewable diesel goes, because we've got diesel trucks already, right? So when you think of ease of implementation, that might be one that stands out versus one of those other unique fuels that would require more infrastructure, require something different. So we're casting a broad net from an education and testing some new technology there. But I'm intrigued by where renewable diesel goes, how the cost trend of that goes, because that is one that perhaps could be adopted faster in that messy middle.
Yeah. And then with respect to hydrogen, I mean, one sort of scenario of, moving from burning diesel in an engine to burning hydrogen in an engine, and then ultimately hydrogen fuel cell, there is a sort of an infrastructure pathway there. So I don't know. I guess I won't even ask you to comment on it, either one of you, because we're really running out of time. We ran a poll. And, the question was, which technology will dominate long haul trucking? And, kind of a silly question because it didn't put any timing on it and all kinds of things. But, battery electric trucks came in at 44%, hydrogen fuel cells at 42%, about 10% and 5% for renewable fuels and burning hydrogen in an engine. So, kind of interesting there and sort of fun to do. Any last comments as we close it out? I mean, attendees, please fill out a survey as you leave. But 10 seconds, 20 seconds, Rob. Any advice for everyone?
Well, I would get started early. I think the one thing that we've learned through implementing a battery electric is just the whole infrastructure is brand new. Those things you have to think about are things we haven't historically had to think about. It's what Lakshmi's organization does so well, but it takes time to work through that process. It takes time to work with the utilities. So I would tell you that however long you think it's going to take, based on our experience, it's going to be longer than that. And I would get started as soon as possible if you're interested in this.
Very good, Rob. Lakshmi?
Yeah, along the same lines, the market is prime. It's time for, the organizations and the fleet operators and big companies to take a stock and start planning for their decarbonized and resilient future.
Well, great. Thank you too for joining us. Thank you all for attending. It's been a lot of fun to dig into these technologies and what we're going to see in a really challenging segment of long haul trucking. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.